Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us again this week. Well, I did promise you last week that this week one of the things we're going to be talking about is the Guyana People's Militia. Of course, those of you who would have been following the news, you would have read by now, or you would have seen it on television, that the Guyana People's Militia would have been reestablished. I know some of you at home, you know much more about the Guyana People's Militia than I do, because yes, the older folks would have known about this. So today we're talking about the Guyana People's Militia, the focus, who it will benefit, and so on. And we're happy that it has been reestablished, especially regarding the little that I've been able to read about and hear about it. And we have, I'm going to call him the expert in that area today, because he is the commandant for the Guyana People's Militia, none other than Colonel Patrick West. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Malika, for having me here on this program.
Good. It is great to have you as a part of Facing the Nation to talk about this very important institution. Also, before I chat with Colonel West, coming up a little later on in today's program, I'm hoping to have the minister within the Ministry of Communities. Of course, she's newly installed minister, Mrs. Valerie Adams Patterson. She will be in studios, and of course, you know, she's already been making some statements regarding what she will do to improve the housing department of the Ministry of Communities. So you can hear all about that from her today on. So stay tuned. But for now, we are talking about the Guyana People's Militia. Sir, first off, let's talk about the purpose of the Guyana People's Militia. What is the purpose of the GPM?
Before I get into exactly what is the purpose, let me say that the Defense Act specifies that the force should comprise of a regular and a reserve component.
Okay.
Right, so that reserve component is what we call today the Guyana People's Militia.
Okay.
Right, the militia, it had its history in Guyana from the 18th century, and it is now resuscitated or reestablished as of the 1st of December 2015. We have basically some simple rules that are given to us. One, to be able to ensure that we provide support in the face of emergencies across this nation, right, through civil defense and all the other areas. Have a body of men available to be augmented into the regular force. Be able to assist the police or the civil powers as we know it in the maintenance of law and order, and to be able to contribute to national development in any way that is required by the Defense Board.
Okay. Interesting, because from what you've just outlined, it's basically a support system. But before the reestablishing of it in last year, December 2015, was there a group of young men, citizens, whatever, on standby to give support without calling it the Guyana People's Militia?
The interesting question. Yes, there was such a group. The group was called the 2nd Infantry Battalion Reserve. And it had similar roles in that were given to the original militia. However, it did not have the capacity for a full national mandate for operations. And it was limited in that way. But now, with the militia returning as it is, we were able to have the full augmentation in all regions to be able to support the Defense Force in its operations, basically.
Is it a case where that group, of course, now in this case, again, People's Militia, the recruits, the functioning members of that group, is it a case where as the months or as the years go by, they would eventually, and this is without an emergency, without them needing to provide support for GDF, is it a case where they would eventually probably for want of a better word, graduate to the Guyana Defense Force? Is that the procedure or the structure?
There are some instances where those who do not have other means of employment would seek for transition into the force. However, most of the times the militia seeks to recruit part-time personnel who are available for duties of defense as well as nation building. And that is the whole concept behind the militia, to have this reserve group of persons who can build as well as defend the nation. And I think that is how we coined the slogan years ago that said, every citizen a soldier. So in one hand, the concept was the rifle, and the next hand was the means of production or development.
What would you say to people who are concerned, and this is not to put a negative spin on it, but this is the reality. People who are concerned that the Guyana People's Militia may be, in a sense, coming back to steal some of the youths. Because the fact is, for young men, especially who cannot find certain jobs easier, they might think it would be easier to go into the Guyana People's Militia and probably develop a certain skill. What would you say to people who may be a bit iffy about that?
Well, we would be happy for young people to be able to join the militia and develop skills because we impart into them specific life skills that I think are essential for their own development and for nation building. Let me just highlight an example to you. During the training last year, when we were still the 2nd Infantry Battalion, we did pilot them through the Jungle and Amphibious Training School. The aim there was to develop skills in being able to handle the forest environment, be able to survive and live in the mining sectors, and to help them to overcome phobias. Because we have a lot of young people migrating there and they suffer because they lack such basic skills. And we did that for the first time last year. And it was a major success. And I think the young people who would have benefited from that can better survive in the interiors of Guyana as they go on whatsoever life expectations call them into.
What is the criteria? What do you have to have? Who can join and so on?
But all categories of persons can join. For the young person, the average young person, once you're between the ages of 17 and 25, you can join the militia. You can, and as it relates to recruitment, as I'm talking about joining, let me just highlight about recruitment.
Yeah.
The militia has regional training centers across this nation, Region 4 at Covan John and Berbice and Linden. Those centers are going to be opened from the second weekend in February, the third weekend, and the fourth weekend in February. That overlaps into March as well. And the persons, once you're between the ages of 18 to 25, you can go, you have a sound primary education, you can join the militia. You come to the center with your TIN number, 2 references, national identification card, and we will process you for enlistment. If you have an NIS number and a bank account number, we will also be happy, all right, in the processing.
After you would have gone through that stage and you're in and so on, is there room for progression in terms of academic development? Because you did say anyone who has a primary level education, they may not have been able to be afforded the opportunity outside of the Guyana People's Militia to further their studies and so on. Do you provide for this in the GPM?
The GPM as well, yes, provides for that. There are packages which are taught or will be taught from the Army Education Program that is going to build capacity in those areas where they are lacking, and it's going to help them to be able to get on board with whatsoever programs are available. In a similar manner that we send persons to academic institutions in the regular force, the provision is also there for such persons if we need particular skills in the different company assignments to be fulfilled.
Okay, all right. Now, let's talk on a little bit of a more serious note. Viewers, if you're now tuning in, I am talking with Colonel Patrick West. He's the commandant of the Guyana People's Militia. As you know, the Guyana People's Militia was recently re-established. So we're talking about that institution and what it will do for Guyana and so on, and who and how Guyanese as a whole will benefit. The Guyana People's Militia was disestablished, of course, that's what I read, about 18 years ago. In your assessment and your experience, sir, of course, because you are a colonel, how how has that this establishing of it affected the functions of the GDF? I mean, this is despite you of the fact that you did tell me about this group that has always been there in a sense to provide support. It has it in any way at all affected the functions or the performance of the Guyana Defense Force?
Well, it is a difficult question that I have not researched
Okay.
much to give you an authoritative answer. But I would presume that the limitations then that were of budgetary allocations would have been the primary thing that would have affected the force and its involvement with the GPM at that time.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about significance. You did say, you did talk about how the group and so on will help. Why should Guyanese feel comfortable or safe or feel that the GPM is significant to us as a country and not just significant to the Guyana Defense Force?
It is a matter of having every citizen, you, your neighbor, your brother, your cousin, everyone involved in this thing called national defense and security. Right? We are our neighbor's keeper, I should say, or our brother's keeper. So we should not fear it. We should be more involved. We have the issue now of porous borders and our inability to close gaps in those areas. We have issues of severe climate change. The regular standing army cannot do these things. The Civil Defense Commission by itself cannot do these things. We need a force who is readily available, who can be mobilized, right, and have the basics of training to be able to be involved in that. And the militia is that capable force that is coming up, that has come on board.
You talked about porous borders and so on, and that took my mind immediately to something which should always be of concern to every single Guyanese, and that is the claims to our territory, parts of our territory, by the Venezuelan. Of course, the issue with Suriname even came up for a bit recently. Is there a process in which the members of the GPM would be briefed on such matters, and how can Guyana depend on the GPM and so on to provide some sort of additional comfort? Because in a situation like that, you need all the possible comfort that you can get.
The role of the defense force still remains the same, which is to defend our territorial integrity. And like I said, the force itself has two components, the regular and the reserve. So the reserve element is a whole part of this process of development. What it does, the reserve, is it ensures that the state does not have a hefty budget in trying to support a large standing army. And you would have seen and read about different forces. The United States has one of the largest reserves. Israel has one of the largest reserves as well, too. You would have seen that they mobilize for special occasions when there are emergencies, threats to their territories. And those reserves, because they are trained correctly, can be easily augmented to support the regular forces.
So then the GPM should, again, and this is not, I'm not taking away anything or trying to take away anything from the GDF, I can't. But in such situations, then the GPM will also be able to, I'm assuming, advise and make possible recommendations on the way forward in not only territorial issues, but other issues affecting our country.
Yes, because I am the commandant and I speak for the GPM. I am at the forum. I'm under the authority of the chief of staff.
Okay.
And whatsoever information is necessary in my command that is critical to national defense and security will obviously be discussed with him.
All right. Do you see us being, with the reestablishment of the GPM, do you see us being able to, in a more efficient manner, respond to natural disasters, for example, droughts and so on? And even before the program viewers, we were discussing the role the GPM may possibly play in that. Do you see us being able to manage the effects of natural disasters?
The GPM would assist greatly in the management of those effects, I would say. It's part of its mandate that was given when it was first established. It has continued until today. And part of the training that we do as well in the reserves is civil defense training. That's disaster response, right? Managing of shelters, controlling drought situations, movement of displaced persons, right? So the extent of training is based on what we will perceive as the threat at the time. But there are some historical things that we have to deal with. It's movement of population, and the floods and droughts that we experience from time to time. And we do training for that.
You do training for that.
As a matter of fact, right now we have 2 officers who are presently attached to the Civil Defense Commission, right, working now in the National Emergency Response Center. And they're trained and they're able to give support that is necessary for this whole process of Operation Dragnet that we run right now.
All right. Oh, okay. So, for clarity, the GPM is also a part of Operation Dragnet because
Yes,
that
it
is the
is.
focus now when we're
It
talking
is
about
part
crime
of
and
Operation
security.
Dragnet.
All right. Anything, again, security matters. I know there are things you may not be able to tell the public at this point in time, but anything specific that you can possibly reveal in terms of the contribution GPM is making to Operation Dragnet.
Like I told you, we are part of that whole process. We are part of the whole border security process as well right now. And basically, those are the things I would want to say at this stage.
Okay, yes, I understand that. I figured that's what you would have said, and that's what you should say. Let's talk about numbers and so on. Again, if you can reveal this, how difficult was it to reestablish the Guyana People's Militia, and are you finding difficulty in recruiting persons?
I don't think that it was difficult for the reestablishment. I think it is by executive order and by a decision of the Defense Board. Those decisions were made. I would want to think so. And numbers for the militia, I don't think it has been an issue, and it will ever be an issue. We have some vibrant young people who are always enthused about being part of the military establishment on a part-time basis. Before we were reestablished, we had, in our regular annual camp training, we had over 300 persons, approximately 300 persons who came in for 2 weeks training. Right, and every weekend in different regions we do training. So the word is out there, but now that we have the political input, persons are already calling to jump on board, and that is why we are going to be recruiting on specific days. We are not recruiting now because there are a number of processes happening with the personnel department, and we don't want it to be overwhelmed. So we're waiting for the 3rd and the 4th week in February for that process to happen.
For that process.
And the advertisements are going to be placed in all the areas, right? All regional areas, advertisements are going to be placed, and it's going to be on national television as well as the newspapers.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
So no one can feel discriminated in any way. It is for all citizens who are willing and ready.
Male and female.
Yes.
Yes, I am happy that you did talk about that, because that would have been my next thing, and people want to know how and when and where they have to go and so on, but you did clear that up. Another thing that we're concerned with, of course, this is before I have to begin to let you go, to let you get back to your busy schedule. Another thing that we're concerned about as Guyanese and this, it's as civilians. We want the people who are placed in a position or placed in positions to serve and protect to do just that, to serve and protect us. So how confident are you in your, if this is the term I should use, screening process? Because I know people can do things and they can be forgiven, but then you don't necessarily want a past criminal being a part of such organization, knowing that they haven't fully turned from their previous ways or their previous life and so on. How can we count on the fact that, we will have members of the GPM not being of shady character and being formally involved in certain things?
Well, we will do all our checks which are necessary, and it starts with the whole public vetting process. Because I can recall only recently we had some persons who came, but the public said these persons were involved in these matters, and we called them and interviewed them, and it was so. We did the final checks, and it was so.
Okay.
And there is also the clearance that we will do as well from the police in some instances. Once we have that kind of information, we will also check it, right? What we will do, because as I said, we are recruiting in February. We are not starting to train till probably the end of March, because we want to ensure that we pass some of these names through the system for checking, whether sample checking or comprehensive checkings to be done, so as to ensure that we have the best product out of this society, right? That is what I can say at this point as it relates to that. But as time goes on, sometimes persons are influenced, and some change over time. You would have seen that, right? They started out well, and they would have changed by something that would have corrupted their minds. We hope that the effects of those negative influences are going to be very low.
Okay, all
But
right.
with the process of regimentation, and that is what is critical to this whole process of training, once we're able to transform the mind correctly in our training, we should be able to stem the tide of those deviant behaviors. We can have a more disciplined, ordered society, in a well-mannered society, all through the process developed in the lives of these young people.
Okay, all right, great. Finally, before I let you go, I know there are many they're everywhere. Every now and again, I meet somebody who would say to me, I was in the army, and I have to say that sometimes I get a kick out of it because I like to refer to myself as a military child, coming from one fully military parent and another one semi, in a sense, because my mother was in the national service. We have so many of them walking around out there, the former soldiers or former military people or what, who may have a lot to offer, and they may want to see their services being utilized in the Guyana People's Militia in terms of training and so. How are provisions, if there are any at all, for these people to be a part of this?
There are provisions, just as there are provisions for the regular person, there are provisions, there are different categorizations given to them, which I will not necessarily explain.
Okay.
But there are provisions for them once they would have left honorably or departed honorably from the force. There are provisions for them to be able to serve
Okay.
in the Guyana People's Militia. And just like everyone else, they would have to visit those centers. Some persons who have retired or resigned from the force, I should say, they would have their service transferred automatically to the militia so they can come and begin to serve. Right? It's all part of the process,
All right.
which is necessary.
All right.
And even you, Malika, would hope to see your name on the list of persons who are willing to serve and be trained.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, it would be a new area for me, but I never back down. And it would be challenging because it's such a new area, but I've never backed down from a challenge, really, once it doesn't endanger my life in any way or so. Okay. But this was really refreshing. Of course, Facing the Nation is always here, and I know that you did just talk about the fact that there will be more public announcements and public pronouncements as we go forward to ensure that we strengthen the Guyana People's Militia. Facing the Nation is always here for you to come on. And of course, before I let you go, I don't know if there's anything that you missed or probably want to add about the Guyana People's Militia, and probably just encouraging young persons to be a part of it.
Like I did say, all the young persons are invited to join, to enlist during the third weekend and the fourth weekend of February. Persons who are qualified and may not have time for the regular training are professionals, doctors, lawyers, dentists, teachers, and who are desirous of making a contribution to their country as well can also come on board and experience the glory of being trained as a soldier and be a part of this whole defensive institution of this nation.
I can tell you, sir, it's really sounding inviting now. Viewers, of course, I've been chatting with the Commandant of the Guyana People's Militia. As you know, it has been recently reestablished, of course. Colonel Patrick West, I want to thank him very much for coming on Facing the Nation. I did promise you earlier that I'll also be chatting with the minister within the Ministry of Communities, but you know how these things go. They're ministers and they're very busy. Things happen. What I will do is take a very quick break. When I come back, I'll tell you what we'll focus on next. Unfortunately, it's a heart-rending situation in our country, and we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it, and I'll even show you a clip where the President, His Excellency of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Brigadier David Granger, has recently addressed the issue. Stay with Facing the Nation.